My introduction into the Insidious franchise started in 2023 when I went to see Insidious the Red Door in theaters. Prior to that, I've always known about this franchise and I've always known the twist of the first movie and how the story with the Lambert family actually ended. But with the release of the sixth one coming out less than 2 weeks from now, I thought it was a good time to finally finish out this franchise. So I started watching the first Insidious and I could not sleep. So I ended up binge watching all 4 movies straight in a row and even having enough time to rewatch The Red Door. So spoiler warning for Insidious 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, you have been warned. Starting with Insidious Chapter 1. Insidious Chapter 1 is the third in the timeline, and it tells the story of the Lambert family as they are experiencing a haunting with their son. They just cannot figure out what is going on. So when they contact Elise and she gives them information, they must fight together to save his life. Let's go ahead and roll my first thoughts.
First thoughts. The look of the film, I'm pretty mixed on. It did get annoying very fast with the music though. Anything would happen got annoying very fast. I do like where it went towards the end. I knew going into it a little bit about where it would go and like a spoiler coming there, but I didn't know the full extent. I definitely didn't know the ending, so glad that wasn't spoiled for me. But the one thing I will say is, why wouldn't you follow instructions? Like, my guy was doing anything but actually following the instructions, which is crazy. But overall, pretty solid start.
One of the first scenes from this movie starts with Renee trying to get hold of a human representative on the phone, which is very funny considering that it's still an annoyance that we have today. But this first movie is known for a couple of things. One of those things being how loud it is. For the last couple of days, I've been trying to decide if it's more annoying in the first one than the second one. And as of recording right now, I will say it's more annoying in this one. This is also known for the twist of having Josh and his family be haunted rather than the place, which I did know going into the movie. I didn't know the full extent of the ending, so I'm glad that was not entirely spoiled for me. I always kind of thought before 2023 that the second one was the ending was actually the ending of the first movie, so I was actually surprised by the full ending and having the Black Bride actually take over Josh. I do really like the ending. This is the best ending out of all of these movies by a landslide for me, and I do like it. We're gonna get to how I feel about the second one and how they handle it, but I'm not entirely a fan of that. Now, this movie also has the lipstick demon, or the introduction of the lipstick demon, and I think the demon works very well in this movie. Initially, I was very mixed on the look of this movie because it is very dark, but after binging all of these movies, I actually quite like how it stands out compared to the other movies. This also has the best further out of all of them, and I do think the demon looks better in this movie than it does in the 5th movie, but we'll get there when we get to the demon and how they handle that. But this was a very solid movie and very solid start. This franchise in general, I will say off the bat, should have just been a one and done movie. But killing off Elise though, in hindsight, Elise is the face of this franchise, and she does do a good job acting for him. So does the family in this one. All around, I don't think they would have entirely killed off Elise if they knew what they were gonna do in the future. So they really kind of did that there. But I do like the ending, so I don't know. I don't think they would probably kill her off though if we did know. And I would just say this when I watched it. Josh did not know much about the further at this point, but he was making such a scene of himself when he was in the further. When Elise told him when he was going in, don't make yourself known, he was doing everything but not making himself not known. He was getting people's faces, he was moving, he was being loud, which is crazy. Of all things you try to do, you're making yourself very, very known. That was just a thought that I had when I was watching this movie and got I'll laugh at, especially at the beginning scene, because that is a very real thing, because I did that a couple of days ago. So overall, this is a very solid start and should have been done as a one movie and done. Insidious Chapter 2 is the fourth in a timeline, and it picks up directly where the first one leaves off, where we follow two storylines. We follow the storyline of them finding out the bride's backstory and possessed Josh and his family.
This was a messy follow-up to the first one. For some reason, they dumbed down Renee, and the music theme, it's less annoying than the first one, but it goes on for longer. Some of the dialogue is delivered in like a dramatic reading, and it's very funny. The biggest thing is when someone's like at a desk delivering news, it sounds like dramatic reading. That I got some humor out of that. Story-wise and where they go, I did know the ending previously before watching this, but just a messy follow-up to the first one is a good way to describe this one.
While I was watching this movie, I had a cat looking at me like this the entire time, which was low-key very creepy. But getting into Chapter 2. Chapter 2 opens with a flashback to 1986, where we see young Josh get a visit from young Elise. And I really do like the opening of this movie for two reasons. I think it works well with the tie into the other movie where we see, and I do like the way they use the time loop for both movies in a way that makes sense, and you do see the opening very different by the time you get to the end. There was also some moments that I actually found very funny. There's one moment, and this is like more in the flashback. So Josh's mom used to work at a hospital, and she is going down the elevator with a patient who passed away the night prior, but she doesn't know this. But the way that she learns it from the nurse across the desk, it feels like a dramatic reading, which is very, very funny when you look at it like that. And Josh is so obviously possessed in this movie that it is funny at times. It is. They had to dumb down Renee for this to work, and that was annoying. And it does take away what made the first ending really stick and really solid, so I don't necessarily like that part of this movie. And it feels like some of the stakes are taken away in this movie compared to the first one. I already did know the ending, which is where Josh and Dalton get their memory wiped of everything and they forget that year. So I already did know that coming in, so maybe that is part of the stakes I didn't know. But that is apparent in here. It is very messy overall, even though I will say it is better than the third one almost. But they do the second story. I divided it into two stories here, because you have the family and Josh storyline, then you have the Black Bride storyline, and I did enjoy the Black Bride storyline, and I do like Carl / the Black Bride. And the basic backstory of this is Carl's mom forced Carl to be girly and basically made Carl kill all those people and become the Black Bride. And I do like that backstory, and I do like when you go in the sequence of the house. The whole sequence is actually very creepy. And they do use found footage in a way that actually adds and makes sense in this movie, which I can't say very often, but I will say that it does make sense. And having Elise come back the way she did was not my favorite part of this movie. But saving her friend, I really wish they didn't save him. I understand why they saved him at the end, so they could erase the mine, but it felt like if they didn't, at least have some more stakes in it. This is just a very messy sequel. I still did get some enjoyment out of it, but it's just a messy sequel. It's like the best way I could describe it. Insidious Chapter 3 is the first in the timeline and a prequel to Chapter 1. It follows Quinn as she is dealing with the death of her mother, so she goes to Elise to make contact with her, but a dark entity makes contact instead. The stakes are back with the third installment. I did like the apartment sequence, and I do actually like the way that the apartment looks. I will say, I did struggle to get through the first 40 minutes of this movie, but after the 40-minute mark, I got into the movie. Elaine's story, I feel, is kind of like all over
the place for me. They do kind of randomly insert another entity that comes later on the franchise. I don't know why they did that. They could have just entirely like left that part out, but I do get a chuckle out of that one line that she did say the entity. That part was funny. But the entity of this movie, speaking of, is so easily defeatable. It's laughable. But overall, I mean, it's fine. Not the best conclusion, but not the worst for the 3 movies.
This is the first of the 5 movies that I really struggled to get through. I found the first half of the movie pretty boring, and Quinn a pretty plain character as well. Acting-wise, it's fine. The guys are a little bit annoying here too, that Elise eventually does work with, because this is the introduction of how they meet in the first place. I do feel with Elise, we first meet her when Quinn goes to her and she doesn't want to help Quinn, but eventually she does help her. I don't like that she's so quickly ready to just help people after Quinn. That just felt a little rushed, especially with the storyline with her husband. And the reason that she didn't want to help Quinn in the first place was she feared an entity was going to go after her. I don't like that they made the Black Bride the entity in that case. It kind of takes away what made the first and to a degree the second one solid movies. This has the worst ending easily out of all of them. You just get a jump scare at the end, which is, it's not as bad as the 4th one when it comes to jump scare, but it's not great. Again, you do have some stakes this time around come back, which is pretty solid to see. With having Quinn be injured to where she can't get up, the entity kind of puts her in a situation where she's kind of forced to lay there. But speaking of the entity, out of all of the entities, this one is definitely the weakest. Not only is it my least favorite, it's so easily defeated. All you have to do is take off the mask. And then at the very end, Quinn said that her mother was trying to contact her, but of course the entity was, but it actually turned out she was right. So the mom does eventually come and take off the mask and defeat the entity, but it was just so easily defeatable. But the loud sounds though, I'll give it credit here too. When it comes to loud music, this is the least annoying of all the movies, so there's pros. So overall, my personal least favorite and the start of the decline of the franchise for me. Now the fourth one. The 4th one is the second one in the timeline, and it tells the story of Elise's backstory, and she goes back to her childhood home after she is called. While this feels the least like an Insidious movie, they do finally get rid of the sound effect that is in the previous movies. When anything would happen, they play that very annoying sound. They get rid of it, and that is a welcome change this come around. I did struggle to get into the movie for the first 40 minutes, just like the 3rd one, but after the 40 minutes I did start to get into this movie. I do like the idea with the demon and the key thing. That was really cool. I do like the backstory part of this movie, and I do like the family parts of the movie and what they do with the family. But the ending does lose me a bit. First off, the guys are creeps and annoying in this movie, and the ending, it is a prequel, right? But the way they actually shoot the ending, you told us it was a prequel, so I don't think you really needed to do all of that. I think it would have been better if they just kept one certain scene towards the end involving a look and the phone call, and it would have been a bit better. But overall, it was an improvement over 3, but it was fine. Just like the 3rd one, I did struggle to get through the first half of this movie. I did like seeing Lisa's backstory, and I think the kid actors did a solid job with their performance. And the twist with having the girl she saw before she ran away actually be alive, and the girl that her father kidnapped versus be a ghost, was done really well. And I started to really get interested in this movie when Elise was going through the house and found the girl hidden behind the wall, and that's when I really got into this movie. This has my favorite entity of all of them so far, which is which is key face, and the thing he does with his fingers with the key also is really cool, and how he's defeated too with a mother's love versus the fear that fuels him. I really like how that was done. I will say out of the Furthers though, this is definitely the weakest of the Furthers. Acting wise, the guys are so annoying and creepy in this one. Did you really need to end the movie with one of them kissing the niece like that? That felt just so unnecessary. They could have just thrown that whole plot line out there. Having the niece be able to have the same powers as Elise, that was interesting enough. I thought that was fine to throw in there. The storyline with her brother felt a little rushed, but when you have an abusive parent like that, it can make sense, and the brother does give a good performance. But the biggest thing about this movie is the ending. I like some parts of this ending. I don't like the full ending. First off, this does have another jump scare like the third one ended, but it is not as well done as the third one. Didn't really need that in there. And at the very end, we see Elise going through the Further, and she opens up a door, and who does she see in one of those red doors? She sees young Dalton, and they just stare at each other in the attic, young Dalton. And she doesn't close the door, and then we see her go into her room, and she has a vision of Dalton in bed, and then we see the phone call that starts the first movie, because this takes place after the third movie, but directly before the events of the first movie. I do wish they cut down some of the ending. I wish they kept that she just like opened up the door and then got the phone call, but that's just me being nitpicky. We have now reached the final movie of the franchise so far, and the fifth in timeline with Insidious: The Red Door. Now, this was my introduction into this franchise, and I saw this in theaters. And whenever I first saw this movie without seeing the movies that came before it, I just thought it was fine and mid at most. But after seeing what came before it, this is not only easily the worst out of all of them, but the most unnecessary out of all of them. The story of this movie mainly follows Josh and Dalton try to figure out what happened all those years prior when the lipstick demon makes a return, and they have to go back to the Further, and Dalton has to be saved again. And majority of this movie is, again, them trying to figure out what happened, and they go in the Further again. Lipstick Demon does return and doesn't look as good as it does in the first movie for some reason. It just looks a bit cheaper this time around. The sound thing makes her return with loud noises, so that was annoying after a while. They showed the family after the events of the second one is pretty solid. I do like they actually showed that there was friction and didn't just go back to happy times. At the very end, we see Josh going to save Dalton, and he sacrificed himself sitting at the door so they can't get in. And I like that ending, and I really wish they ended it there. Kind of how they had a similar ending to the first one that wasn't very happy or positive. I wish they stuck the ending with Dalton painting over the door and Josh being stuck there, and I would have been happy with the ending. But Josh's father, well, it turns out his father tried to end this many years ago, so his father helps Josh get out of this situation, and he might rekindle with his wife, and he walks out and he sees Elise at the end vanish for a second, so she makes a guest appearance, which is solid enough. I'm surprised they didn't utilize her any other way in this movie like they did the previous ones. But I do like how they used art in this movie, I will say. Art was all the way in the first movie when Dalton was drawing, so I am glad they did make him an artist. And there's just not a lot to talk about with this movie because most of it is stuff you already see, and it's just pretty boring and unnecessary. But that is the end of this Insidious video. Comment down below what your favorite Insidious movie is. Are you looking forward to the new release? Let's have a conversation, and subscribe if you want to hear more on this channel. And when the new Insidious comes out, I'll see you guys soon.